Let's talk about the Pythagorean Theorem. We use it when we're looking at right triangles. Here's an example of a right triangle. One of the angles in a right triangle is 90 degrees. The two legs that touch that we call legs. The side across from the right angle we call the hypotenuse. We use the Pythagorean Theorem to figure out how long the hypotenuse is. Here is a right angle. We can use the Pythagorean Theorem to figure out how long that third side would be. One side of my angle is 4 dots, and the other side is 3 dots. So now I can draw in my mystery side. We're going to figure out how long that green side is. The first thing I need to do is square the two sides I know. So when we're squaring them, both sides of that square are the same length. So they're 4 on one side and 4 on the other. That means inside that square, there are 16 dots. Because 16 equals 4 squared, or 4 raised to a power of 2. Now let's look at the other side. Each side of this square is 3. So when I count them up, there are 9 dots inside. So 9 equals 3 squared, or 3 raised to the power of 2. What the Pythagorean Theorem tells us is if we drew a third square on our unknown side, it adds up to the 2 squares we know. So 9 plus 16. Here, 9 plus 16 equals 25. This doesn't mean that that line is 25, it means the square is 25. We don't want the square. We want the square root. So what is a square root? If we have a square and we want to know the square root, we want to know not how much is inside, but how much is one side. This square has an inside of 16. So we want to figure out what one side of 16 is. I just drew the square root sign around the 16. So one side of the square is 4. This means that 4 times 4 equals 16. It's also 4 squared. Squares and square roots are the opposite. If I know how much is inside my square, square roots tell me how long one side is. Charts like this help us figure out what the square root is. Back to our square. We knew it had 25 dots in it. So if I find the square root of 25, that equals 5. So the third side of my triangle is 5. Let's do an example problem. Here, the two sides we know are 9 and 8. The first thing I'm doing is writing out the Pythagorean Theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. I've marked which sides are a and b. So now I need to square them. A is equal to 9, so 9 squared, or 9 times 9, equals 81. B squared equals 8 times 8, or 64. Next, I'm going to add together 81 and 64. When I add them together, I get 145. I cleaned things up a little bit, but now I want to know what the square root of 145 is, because I don't want the full square, just one side. I went back and looked at the chart and found that it was about 12. When I was looking at the chart, I looked for what's the closest number to 145.